Do it.
Hello there, my name's Cademan David. Welcome to my eccentric academy. Now, I am known for being a huge fan of Star Trek. However, I also love Star Wars. Not quite as much as I like Star Trek, sure, but both franchises have so much to offer. And one of the things I like the most about Star Wars is the villain, Emperor Palpatine. And I love him because he is evil. And when I say that, I don't mean evil as one of the attributes his character has. No, I mean because Palpatine is the embodiment of evil.
The definite article, you might say.
Now, I opened this video by mentioning I really like Star Trek. And that's true. But I want to discuss one of the reasons I do really love Star Trek. It's because it paints a very realistic, nuanced idea of morality. And that is that there isn't really any evil characters in Star Trek. All of the quote-unquote villain characters are just people that are victims to a bad philosophy. The Klingons or the Cardassians aren't evil. They're just part of a culture which has a bad moral framework. The same thing could even be said about the Ferengi. And I like that a lot. So why is it that if that's what I love about Star Trek, do I like Palpatine, who I say just is evil? To explain this, I'm going to look at a Bible passage. So bear with me while I dig into the Bible and sort of share with how it applies to this conversation of Palpatine in Star Wars. So if you want to follow along at home, this is me looking at Genesis 4:7. And this is God talking to Cain when he grows angry after God doesn't appreciate his sacrifice as much as his brothers. You know, jealousy, which Yoda expertly calls the shadow of greed.
Jealousy? The shadow of greed, that is.
If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Now, the reason I read this is to paint this picture of sin being something that desires you. You can think of sin as being something like corruption. A strong belief that I share with j.r.r. Tolkien is that nothing was created evil. That is, nothing was made to be evil, but everything that is evil is something that was good, twisted, and corrupted. So evil is simply a corrupting force. And I think nothing fits better as being that someone that desires you than Darth Sidious, especially in episode 3 with how he treats Anakin.
Soon I will have a new apprentice, one far younger and more powerful.
He desires to take Anakin, a Jedi, and twist him into a Sith, so he will own Anakin. And we see this sort of mirrored, again bringing up Tolkien, in The Ring. The Ring is something like fleshly desire. The Ring is that evil, that corrupting force that desires to just have you and corrupt you. And that's the same thing that Darth Sidious is. Now, I also love the Dark Plagueis scene.
It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith.
Because in both Matthew 4 and Genesis 3, the devil uses certain temptation techniques And we can fairly easily say that Darth Sidious uses at least 2 of these same temptation techniques to move Anakin from the light side to the dark side. And I'm going to try and present a reading where Darth Sidious actually uses all 3 in a way. So let's get right to that. First being questioning God. And that's the snake saying, did God really say? And Darth Sidious's version of this is by getting Anakin to test the Jedi.
Anakin, you know I'm not able to rely on the Jedi Council. If they haven't included you in their plot, they soon will.
Right? It's sort of like the good moral compass in the situation. And, that's pretty clear to see in this scene, but also he does it in simply saying that the Jedi are the same as the Sith.
Good as a point of view, Anakin. The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way.
And again, that's the serpent saying, did God really say? That's Darth Sidious saying, oh, why can't you, learn these dark side style abilities?
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
Now, the second thing that the devil tempts you with is power. And it's very easy to see Palpatine tempting Anakin with power in that Darth Plagueis spiel. And the third one is food. But I would wager that could also more broadly mean the hungers of the flesh. What your flesh desires. And how does Palpatine play to this? Well, it's like the previous mentioned scene where Yoda says that jealousy is the shadow of greed. I would wager that in these Star Wars films, the romance between Padme and Anakin doesn't actually come from true love, but from a sense of greed from Anakin. Anakin wants to have Padme, but he doesn't love her. And I know it's a bit of a stretch, but in the universe of Star Wars, Yoda says that when our loved ones die, we should rejoice for them because they're joining the Force.
The fear of loss is a path to the dark side.
I won't let these visions come true, Master Yoda.
Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them, do not. Miss them, do not.
And I feel like that's, the sort of Star Wars mumbo-jumbo equivalent of our loved ones are in heaven with the Lord and Creator himself. But because of the greed, Anakin wants to keep Padme. And that's not love, that is selfishness. That is his fleshly hunger to have someone to connect with intimately. And I feel like you can even see that throughout the prequels, where it feels less like Anakin actually has a loving relationship with Padme, and more like he just uses her for emotional support. It doesn't seem like a healthy relationship by any means. Now, I don't necessarily think that was on purpose, but I think sometimes George Lucas in particular accidentally steps on something really deep and really good. And I think this is one of those cases. And with all that groundwork laid out, this is something that I've actually talked about before on a different YouTube channel. And Because I think I actually said it pretty well the first time, I'm just going to use that old footage from over a year ago. The serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And we take that and compare it to Matthew 4:7. Jesus answered him, "It is also written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" You'll find it almost seems like Jesus is replying to what the serpent said in Genesis 3. And in both these passages, it's the idea of testing God. Now, if we take Genesis 3:4, "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good from evil." And compare it to Matthew 4:10, Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God, and serve him only." What we see is the devil is offering power. Now let's take Genesis 3:6. When the woman saw that the fruit was good for food, and pleasing to the eye, and also beneficial for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Compare it to Matthew 4:4. Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." We see being tempted with food. So I think when we're being tempted by the devil, the Bible has given us these 3 areas to watch out for when we might be being tempted. Area number 1, testing God. And testing God here is something more like working in opposition to what God said. Telling yourself, did God really say that? I think I'll go this different route.
The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way.
And then the other thing, the devil might offer us something like power, which might just be something like likability. Oh, people will like you better if you don't hold on to these morals that God has shown you. It's, hey, if you're willing to sacrifice these morals, then that's pretty cool because it will cause you to have more power.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
And that comes in the form of respect, that comes in the form of likability. That's sort of, I think, what is power here, where it's like, hey, you could be worshipped. And then the next thing is just food, but also that's something like the hungers of the flesh.
Attachment leads to jealousy. The shadow of greed, that is.
And that could be used in the case of something like sexual hunger. It's your body says, I want these things, which, by the way, I believe generally things that our body wants are actually good for us in certain predicaments or within small numbers, right? You desire food, and that's a good thing, because if you didn't desire food, then you're likely to just starve yourself. Now, I think something that's so cool that we see here is Jesus is actually telling us how to avoid these attacks from the devil. For example, when the devil is tempting you with the hungers of the flesh, a way to get out of that is to pursue the hungers of the soul, the hungers of the mind. And that's something like, hey, give yourself spiritual food. And then we have here, when the devil says, it's written, what we have is we have Jesus replying, it's also written this thing. So again, Jesus is showing us a way in which we can combat the attacks of the devil. And that's looking at multiple passages. That's being familiar with different passages. So that's really cool. What's really interesting is we have here the sort of like, oh, I'll offer you power and you'll rule over these nations if you worship me, which is really interesting because I think Jesus here actually responded to the devil in two different ways at the same time, because what he said is he says, only worship God. And that's like, only worship God, I'm not going to worship you. But it's also when the devil offers for you to be worshipped, you can look and say, oh, no, nice try, devil. Only worship God. Don't worship cavemen. That would be weird. Cavemen is not worthy of worship.
You're all not worthy.
Now, this is where this video is going to get a little bit less lighthearted. I initially sort of planned to end this video here, but as I was filming this, something actually happened that made me think I needed to add a little bit to the end of this video. And that is the unfortunate death of this man, Charlie Kirk. Now, I'm not super familiar with this guy. I sort of know about him here and there. I'm not the biggest fan, but I think anytime someone dies, especially in this particular manner, it's worth mourning over. And it is worth sort of examining, especially because this man made such a big influence. And I think in his life, something I wasn't aware of till after his passing, he really sort of preached a certain message, which I think, interestingly, also sort of is the reverse of the mentality that his shooter must have had.
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
So I hope by sharing this and making this video that this is something that Charlie Kirk would appreciate. So in episode 3, there's the scene where Padme begs Anakin to convince Palpatine to end the war. She says the war's over. It's time for diplomacy.
Have you ever considered that we may be on the wrong side?
What do you mean?
What if the democracy we thought we were serving no longer exists? And the Republic has become the very evil we've been fighting to destroy?
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
This war represents a failure to listen. Now you're closer to the Chancellor than anyone. Please, ask him to stop the fighting and let diplomacy resume.
And it's interesting because this is another thing that Palpatine uses to get people on his side, is by the use of war over diplomacy, with him telling Anakin to kill Count Dooku.
Good, Anakin, good. Kill him.
That's really sort of the start of Palpatine, for lack of a better word, seducing Anakin into the dark side, is by getting him to kill Count Dooku, which is also what he tried to do to Luke in The Return of the Jedi.
Heat has made you powerful. Now, fulfill your destiny and take your father's place at my side.
I'll never turn to the dark side.
So I'm going to read one more Bible passage here. And this is in 2 Timothy 2:24 through 26. And the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but must be kind to everyone, able to teach, not resentful. Opponents must be gently instructed in hope that God would grant them repentance, leading them to the knowledge of the truth. And then they will come to their senses and escape the trap of the devil, who has taken them captive to do his will. So, what I'm trying to say here is that the answer isn't violence. The answer isn't killing Count Dooku. The answer isn't killing Darth Vader. But rather, what this passage here says is, interestingly, exactly what Luke does in The Return of the Jedi, freeing Darth Vader from the trap that Emperor Palpatine had put him in so that Anakin would do the will of Palpatine.
I'll never turn to the dark side.
And that is our goal. So instead of getting angry and fighting, waging on a useless war of violence, maybe instead let's fight the war of ideas. Instead of senseless violence against anyone who has a different opinion, let's fight different ideas in their proper realm. Fighting ideas with superior ideas. At the end of the day, you only need to get violent if your idea doesn't hold weight. And I am now going to close off this video just by asking the question, what or who are the Darth Vaders that are in your life that God is calling you to free from the devil's trap? Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe and like this video. I would love to hear any comments expanding on or disagreeing even with the ideas I presented in this video. I'd love to hear anything you have to say. On a side note, I actually just realized I'm sort of giving off Luke Skywalker from The Return of the Jedi vibes here, you know? That wasn't on purpose. I just thought it was a good day for green lighting, and this is what I was wearing. Anyway, it works out. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day. Farewell, live long and prosper. In that Darth Plagueis, bleh.